My daughter uninvited me to my grandson's birthday party 2 hours before the event. She said, "Don't come again. My in-laws just confirmed they will be attending, and I don't want them to see you closer to my son." I was surprised, but I just said okay and calmly stopped dressing up. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to John Veltman from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I always like keeping my life simple, quiet, predictable. That's how it had to be when you're a single father raising a little girl who needed more than what you knew how to give. My name is Raymond, but no one really calls me that anymore. These days, I'm just Grandpa, and honestly, that title meant more to me than any name or job or accolade ever did. My grandson, Micah, he's 5, got a head full of curls and the loudest laugh you've ever heard in a child. That boy made every hard year I survived feel like it had a purpose. His mother, my daughter, Tasha, used to say he was just like me, gentle, observant, stubborn when he felt something wasn't right. And I'd smile when she said that, because despite everything that had changed between us, there was a time when she saw the best parts of me, not just the worn-down edges. I raised Tasha alone after her mother walked out. No dramatic exit, just a suitcase quietly zipped up and a note left on the kitchen table. Tasha was 6. I still remember the way she stood in the doorway that night, holding onto her teddy bear, whispering, "Is Mommy coming back?" And I had to kneel down, choke back the hurt in my throat, and lie to her. Maybe, but I knew the answer was no. After that, I learned quickly how to braid hair with shaky fingers, how to sew up a torn princess dress at midnight, how to listen without fixing, to hold her without needing words. I worked at the post office for 23 years. Steady paycheck, long hours, no glory. But it was enough. Enough to keep her safe, fed, and dreaming. Things started changing when she met Brandon. I remember the first time she brought him home. Stiff smile, firm handshake, expensive shoes. Polished, polite, and completely unreadable. His parents were even worse. They visited once, and I swear the way his mother looked at our modest home, you'd think she'd walked into a shack. She never said anything rude, just dismissive. Like I was a footnote in Tasha's story, a placeholder until the real family came along. At first, I didn't mind. I thought, if Tasha's happy, I'll learn to adjust. I kept my distance during big gatherings, stayed quiet at the fancy brunches. When Micah was born, I saw a sliver of hope. She needed me again. I was the one who rocked him to sleep when she was recovering. I took night shifts to give her rest. I bought diapers, formula, all without her asking. And when he said Grandpa for the first time, it broke something open in me I didn't know was still locked. I thought maybe, just maybe, I had a second chance. If not with Tasha, then with the family we could rebuild through Micah. But that hope didn't last. The older Micah got, the more visible the cracks became. Tasha stopped asking me to babysit as often. She started filtering what I could and couldn't say around her in-laws. One time at a barbecue, I mentioned how Tasha used to love playing in the mud as a kid, and Brandon's mother gave me that look. The one that said, "Don't remind us where she came from." Tasha laughed it off, but I noticed she never asked me to come to another family event after that. Still, I stayed in Micah's life. Saturday mornings at the park. Story time over FaceTime when they couldn't visit. And birthdays. I always had birthdays. That was my thing. I'd bake the cake myself, organize the games, even dress up as some ridiculous character if it made Micah laugh. Every year, no matter how distant Tasha became, she'd call and say, "Dad, can you help with the party?" And every year, I said yes. Because that was our last thread. The one space where I was allowed to show up. So when she called this year, 2 weeks before his 5th birthday, and said, "Can you handle the vendors again?" I'm swamped. I didn't hesitate. I told her, "You got it." I booked the magician Micah loved last year, the same balloon artist who could twist a giraffe in 30 seconds flat. I ordered a cake from the bakery that made his first smash cake, the one with the lemon blueberry filling he devoured with both hands. I even found a local puppeteer who did silly voices just to add something new. It felt good, being useful again, being needed. And for a while, I let myself believe this year would be different. But belief is a dangerous thing when you're clinging to people who've already let you go. That Friday morning, I ironed my best shirt. I polished my shoes, packed the receipts, vendor schedules, and 2 wrapped gifts in the trunk. I was almost ready to leave when my phone rang. Tasha, I smiled, expecting her to say, "We're running a bit late. Can you come early?" Instead, her voice was strained, almost clinical. "Dad, don't come again." I blinked. "What? Don't come to the party." "Brandon's parents just confirmed they'll be attending, and I just think it's best if things are smooth." "Smooth?" I echoed, my chest tightening. She hesitated. "I don't want them seeing you too close to Micah. It'll just raise questions. You know how they are." I stood there in silence, staring at the blue tie I was planning to wear. "You understand, right?" she asked, like she was doing me a favor. And all I said was, "Okay," because what else could I say? It's strange how silence can make a room feel smaller. After Tasha hung up, I didn't move right away. My phone screen went dark, but her words echoed longer than the call had lasted. "Don't come again." Like I was some forgotten guest who'd accidentally been sent an invitation. I looked at the carefully folded pants on the edge of my bed, the black dress shoes I only wore to church or birthday parties. And suddenly, they felt ridiculous, out of place, like I'd overdressed for rejection. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, hands resting on my knees. I could still hear the bounce house inflating in my head, the magician warming up his rabbit trick, Micah's laughter ringing out. It all felt so vivid because it was mine. I'd built that party from scratch, again. She didn't even ask how much it cost. Didn't offer to split it. Just assumed I would take care of it because I always did. Because I always showed up, even when she didn't want me seen. But there was a line somewhere. And maybe this was it. I reached for the folder on the dresser, one I'd labeled Micah's Party with a Sharpie. Inside were the receipts, confirmations, time slots, addresses. I opened the first one, the bakery. I'd paid half up front. I called, and they were kind, understanding. Refunded the deposit without hesitation. The caterer was next, then the magician, then the balloon artist. With each cancellation, I felt lighter, but not in a good way. More like a slow deflation. Like a tire going flat on the side of a road, long after the journey's been abandoned. It wasn't about money. I've spent thousands over the years on Micah's birthdays, on Tasha's emergencies, on rent she couldn't make when Brandon was between jobs. I never kept score, never asked to be thanked. But this wasn't a missed payment. This was erasure. This was being told, outright, that my presence was a liability. That my face, my love, my entire existence didn't fit the image she needed to uphold in front of her in-laws. I thought about Micah, about what she'd tell him when he asked where Grandpa was. Would she say I got sick? That I forgot? Or would she just shrug and hope he didn't ask twice? There was a knock at the door mid-afternoon. I didn't answer. I wasn't in the mood to be seen. But through the blinds, I spotted my neighbor, Alonzo, an old friend who'd known Tasha since she was small. I eventually opened the door, not saying much. "You okay?" he asked, stepping in without waiting for a full invitation. I gave him a short nod and sat back down. "Wasn't the party today?" he asked, glancing at the untouched gift bags on the hallway bench. "Not anymore," I said. He sat across from me, studying my face. "What happened?" I told him. Not the long version, just the bones of it. His lips pressed together. He didn't say much at first, just leaned back and shook his head. "You know, man, sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who cut us the deepest, because they know exactly where it hurts." I nodded slowly, his words landing heavy. "She's wrong for this," he added. "And deep down, she knows it." But that didn't change what happened. That didn't unring the phone call or erase the cold way she'd said again, like my presence was some kind of recurring error. It didn't uninvite me from my own grandson's childhood. Later that evening, I found myself wandering into the garage. That's where I kept a few old boxes, photo albums, drawings Tasha had made as a kid, even the ones where she'd scribbled "Daddy" in wobbly crayon. I sat on the floor, flipping through one of the albums. There was a picture of her 5th birthday, me holding her in my lap, frosting on her nose, the handmade cake lopsided but proudly displayed. I had barely enough back then to afford decorations, so I cut paper streamers from grocery bags. But she'd said it was the best party she ever had. How do we get from that to this? How does a daughter who once clung to your neck with love grow into a woman who's embarrassed to let you hold her child in public? I thought I'd find anger in those memories, bitterness, but all I felt was grief. Pure, silent grief. For the man I'd been back then. For the daughter who used to need me. For the boy who would grow up not knowing the full truth of why his grandfather stopped coming around. That night, I didn't eat dinner. Just drank a glass of water and sat outside on the porch as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. I imagined the party starting without me. I imagined the awkward tension when the vendors didn't arrive. The in-laws whispering behind designer sunglasses. Brandon making excuses. Tasha pacing, checking her phone, maybe even calling me, though I doubted it. Not yet. There's a strange power in disappointment. Once you stop resisting it, it wraps around you like a second skin. Familiar, comfortable even. I'd lived under its shadow for years with Tasha, hoping each new birthday or favor or helping hand would be the one that broke through. But this was different. This was final. I stood up, walked back inside, and turned off the porch light. And just like that, I took my name off the guest list of a life that no longer had a seat for me. The next morning, the house was too quiet. I woke before the sun rose, not out of habit, but because my body simply refused to rest. I sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, staring down at my hands. Old, calloused, lined with years of work that never seemed to be enough. There was a time when these hands built swing sets, fixed leaky sinks, assembled last-minute dollhouses on Christmas Eve. Now they just shook a little when I tried to make coffee. I poured the water too fast and spilled some on the counter, and for some reason, that tiny mess broke something in me. I had to pause and press my palms against the edge of the counter just to steady myself. I hadn't heard from Tasha. Not a thank you. Not an explanation. Nothing. Part of me kept checking my phone out of reflex. Old muscle memory. But every time I saw that empty screen, it reminded me that my usefulness had expired. And that realization didn't come with fireworks or yelling. It came with silence. Sharp and clean. By midday, I decided to finish what she started. I made a full list of everything I'd already canceled. Then I checked my email for vendor replies. Most had confirmed the refunds were processed. The cake bakery had even included a small note. Sorry to hear about the cancellation. Let us know if we can help next time. I stared at the words next time like they were written in another language. Because right now, the idea of a next time felt impossible. I thought about bringing the unused gift to Micah sometime later, maybe dropping it off without fanfare. But something about that felt wrong. Like showing up after being told to disappear would only teach him love was something you had to fight for. Something you had to earn by making yourself small. That afternoon, I drove out to the park. Not the one where the party was supposed to be, God no, but a smaller one near my neighborhood. One where Tasha used to play when she was little. I sat on the same bench where I once watched her tumble down the slide in her yellow dress, clapping for herself as if she'd just landed a triple flip at the Olympics. I closed my eyes and could still hear her laughter from back then. Pure, unfiltered, before she learned that appearances mattered more than joy. I didn't even hear him walk up. Alonzo, my neighbor. Mind if I sit? He asked, already lowering himself onto the bench beside me. Be my guest, I murmured. He watched the kids playing for a minute before saying, heard the party didn't go well. I turned to him, surprised. You heard that already? Brenda's cousin was there, he said. Said the whole thing was a mess. No food, no music, just some plastic folding tables and a dollar store banner. Brandon's folks were pissed. I looked away, biting the inside of my cheek. You really canceled everything? He asked. I nodded slowly. Every last one. There was a long pause. You know? People are going to say you were petty. I didn't respond. But that's not what I see, he continued. What I see is a man who got disrespected and finally said no more. What I see is someone who's been showing up for years, doing the emotional and financial labor of 3 people, and finally realized he didn't owe anyone his silence. His words sat heavy between us, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I didn't want it to go like this, I admitted. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. He nodded. Of course you did. You're her father. You raised her. That should count for something. But it didn't. Not to her. Not enough, anyway. When I got back home, I noticed the envelope on my porch. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Tasha's. Inside was a birthday photo, Micah smiling in front of a sad little cake, balloons half deflated in the background. No note. Just the image. Like that was supposed to be enough. I stared at it for a long time. At his little face. His joy, so innocent, so unaware of the adults failing around him. And I felt a deep ache, the kind that reaches behind your ribs and sets up camp in your lungs. Because I love that boy, more than I knew how to say. But love without respect is a leash. And I'd worn that leash long enough. That night, I called my sister. Hey, she said cautiously. I heard some things. You okay? Define okay. I replied with a half-hearted laugh. She sighed. Tasha's upset. Says you sabotaged the party. She uninvited me. I said flatly. I know. I told her she was wrong for that. Did she listen? She cried. Blamed you. Then cried some more. You know how she is. Always trying to keep up appearances. Always worried about what Brandon's parents think. I rubbed my temples. I'm done bending so she can look good in their eyes. Then you did the right thing, my sister said. And I'm proud of you. And there it was. The first time someone had said those words to me in a very long time. I felt them settle in my chest like warmth. Like light. Like something I hadn't even realized I needed. I didn't sleep much that night. But it wasn't because of regret. It was because, for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of peace. I was halfway through sweeping the porch the next morning when the call came through. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out without checking the screen. For a split second, I didn't recognize the number. Then I realized it was Tasha's. She must have been calling from Brandon's phone. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't want to answer it. Not really. I already knew the tone I'd hear on the other end. That shaky, guilt-laced panic she only pulled out when things spun out of her control. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but old habits die hard. So I pressed accept and raised the phone to my ear. Dad. Her voice was breathless, panicked. Why didn't the vendors show up? I didn't say anything right away. Dad, I'm serious, she said louder now. The party is a mess. There's no food. No cake. Nothing. Brandon's parents are here, and they're asking questions. Everyone's asking questions. Mike is upset. He keeps asking when the magician's coming. Why would you do this? There it was. Not a question. An accusation dressed as confusion. Because, I said, my voice even, you told me not to come. So I didn't. But that doesn't mean, she started, then cut herself off with a frustrated sigh. I didn't mean cancel everything. You didn't mean for your words to have consequences? I asked calmly. You didn't mean for me to take you seriously when you said, don't come again. She was crying now. I could hear it. Heavy breathing, sniffling, the sharp edge of her voice cracking. I was just trying to keep things peaceful, Dad. You know how they are. I didn't want a scene. You mean you didn't want me to be seen? That's not fair. It's exactly fair. I snapped, the first real heat in my voice. You told me my presence was a problem. So I removed myself. And everything I brought with me. There was silence on the line. Just her breathing. I paid for those vendors out of my own pocket. I arranged that party from top to bottom. And 2 hours before it started, you decided I was disposable. I paused. So I treated myself like you did. I disposed. I didn't think you'd actually pull out. No, I interrupted. You didn't think I'd stand up for myself. You've gotten used to me swallowing things. Biting my tongue. Showing up no matter how far you pushed me away. She started to say something, but I cut her off again. Your golden in-laws should have paid the vendors. Since you needed them more than you needed me. That sentence landed hard. I could feel it, even over the phone. Her crying shifted. Softer now. Not the loud, performative sobs I'd heard when she wanted something. This was different. This was grief. Shame. Maybe realization. I didn't say anything else. I just let it hang. Micah was looking forward to it, she said, barely above a whisper. I know, I replied. So was I. Another long pause. The kind where all the things left unsaid collect in your throat like stones. You didn't have to punish me like that, she added, voice trembling. This wasn't a punishment, I said. It was a boundary. She fell silent again. And this time, it stayed that way. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't either. We just let the silence end the call for us. I stood there for a few minutes, phone still in my hand, heart pounding in a slow, steady rhythm. Not from anger, not from satisfaction, just the aftershock of finally saying what I needed to say. My legs felt heavy as I walked back inside. I sat down at the kitchen table, folded my hands together, and stared out the window. The street outside was quiet. A bird flitted across the power line. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. It hit me then, what I had done. Not with malice. Not with revenge. But with clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to smooth things over. I didn't offer to fix something I hadn't broken. I simply let her feel the absence she created. Let her realize that my love wasn't unconditional if it came at the cost of my dignity. Around noon, my sister stopped by. She had that cautious look again, the one she wore when she wasn't sure what version of me she'd find. She called me, she said, sitting across from me without waiting to be invited. I figured. She's upset. Really upset. Yeah, I said, pouring myself a glass of water. So am I. She said you humiliated her in front of Brandon's parents. I looked at her. She humiliated me first. She nodded slowly, as if she didn't want to agree too fast. She's not used to you saying no. Well, I said, sipping my water, she'd better get used to it. We sat in silence for a while, the air between us tense but honest. She's going to twist this, my sister said finally. Make it sound like you ruined the day. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I just stopped carrying the weight for everyone else. She smiled faintly. I'm proud of you. I really am. It was strange how those words made my chest tighten, not from sadness, but from the sheer unfamiliarity of hearing them. I'd spent most of my adult life being needed, not appreciated. Loved from a distance, but rarely invited in. Now, for the first time, I wasn't chasing acceptance. I was choosing self-respect. That night, I turned my phone off. I didn't want to see the messages, the apologies, or the passive-aggressive texts that might follow. I'd said what needed to be said. The ball wasn't in my court anymore. And for once, I was okay with that. The ripple started slow. A text from a cousin I hadn't heard from in months. A voicemail from an old church friend who just wanted to check in. Then came the group chat messages, screenshots forwarded to me from my sister, snippets of family gossip dressed up as concern. I heard Raymond canceled Micah's birthday out of spite. Poor Tasha. She must be devastated. But why would he punish the child? Asterisk, I read them all. Every word. Some made me laugh, sharp, bitter chuckles with no real joy behind them. Others stung more than I expected. But none of them surprised me. People rarely ask for context when a man steps back. Especially a father. Especially one who's always been reliable, quiet, dependable to a fault. When you disappear, they don't ask why. They ask what went wrong with you. Because if the stable one finally cracks, it means they've all been standing on borrowed ground. By midweek, the narrative was clear. I was the villain. The selfish grandpa. The one who made it all about himself. And Tasha, well, she was the struggling mother who just wanted to keep the peace. That's the version Brandon's parents believed, anyway. I'd become the cautionary tale they probably told their friends. The unhinged ex-postman who canceled a child's party over hurt feelings. They wouldn't mention the years I paid their son's rent, the time I took Tasha and Micah in when Brandon lost his job, or the Christmases I spent alone so they could all vacation without worrying about my presence. And honestly, I didn't care about them. Not really. But Tasha? That part still hurt. The hardest part of being a parent is realizing your child might grow into someone who doesn't choose you. Not because you failed them, but because they've convinced themselves that distance is more palatable than honesty. Tasha had chosen convenience over connection, reputation over reality. And she expected me to do what I always did, swallow the insult and show up anyway. This time, I didn't. And the silence that followed was deafening. 3 days after the party, Alonzo came by again. He brought a six-pack and 2 lawn chairs, like we were just old friends catching up. We sat in the driveway under the porch light, the quiet hum of summer bugs in the background. You all right? He asked after a while. Getting there, I replied. You know, he said, cracking open a beer. My cousin called me the other night. Asked if I thought you really torched the party. He made air quotes with his fingers. I snorted. Did you tell her I also set the cake on fire? Nah, he grinned. Told her you finally grew a backbone. Said you did what most people are too scared to. I didn't answer, but that small nod I gave him. He understood what it meant. It's not easy, he added. Saying no to your own blood. No, it's not, I said. But being constantly disrespected by them isn't easy either. We clinked bottles, the sound small and honest. I'm proud of you, Ray, he said. It was the second time someone said that to me that week. Funny how years could go by without hearing those words, and now they were popping up like dandelions through cracked concrete. I didn't know what to do with them, honestly, but I let them land. I let myself believe I'd earned them. The next day, I went out to the garage to clear some space. There was still a bin of unused decorations, unopened favors, leftover supplies from the party that never was. I thought about donating them, maybe giving them to a community center or school. As I sifted through the pile, I found the small handwritten note I'd taped to the magician's folder. Micah's favorite trick is the one with the scarf that turns into a bird. I stood there holding it for a long time. It was silly, really, just a scribble. But it meant something. Proof that I knew my grandson. Not just his name or his birthday, but his joys, his specific, small wonders. That kind of knowing can't be faked. It comes from showing up, year after year, even when you're unacknowledged. I didn't get that from Brandon's parents. They threw money at parties and bragged about gifts, but they didn't know Micah's bedtime songs or which story scared him. I did, because I had been there, because I still cared, but I wasn't going to keep caring in silence. That Sunday, I dressed for church. Not for anyone else, but for myself. I wore the same shoes I'd planned for the party, polished until they gleamed. I sat in the back pew and kept my hands folded. A few people glanced my way. Some offered awkward nods. One woman, Ms. Linda from the choir, walked up and said softly, I heard about what happened. For what it's worth, I think you were brave. Brave? I asked, surprised. Standing up for yourself, she said. Even when it breaks your heart. That hit harder than I expected. I smiled, nodded, and watched her walk back down the aisle. When I got home, there were no new messages from Tasha. No apology. No attempt at clarity. But there was a voicemail from Brandon, short, venomous, filled with blame. You embarrassed her. You embarrassed us. Hope you're happy. Don't expect to be invited again. I deleted it without listening twice. Because for once, I wasn't hoping to be invited. I was finally okay with being on the outside if it meant standing on my own 2 feet. And as I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, legs stretched out, the house still and steady around me, I realized this wasn't the end of something. It was the start of a life where I got to choose me. It's been 2 weeks. 2 weeks since the party I didn't attend. Since the moment I quietly took my name off the guest list of a family that treated me more like a shadow than a father. Since I finally drew the line, not in anger, but in clarity. And every day since, I've lived with a strange new companion, stillness. Not loneliness. Not quite peace either. Just stillness. Like the noise finally stopped, and now I can hear my own thoughts again. At first, it felt unnatural, foreign, but slowly, it started to feel like mine. In the beginning, I kept expecting a knock at the door. Some grand gesture. A sign that Tasha had realized what she'd done. But none came. There were no flowers. No cards. Just silence. I'd see pictures of Micah on social media. Tasha's posts filled with hashtags and filters. Curated snapshots of a picture-perfect life. She looked happy. Or maybe she looked practiced. Sometimes I couldn't tell the difference. And it wasn't bitterness that crept up as I scrolled. It was grief. Quiet, heavy grief for what could have been. For what used to be. I wrote a letter I didn't send. I do that sometimes when my chest feels too full and there's no one safe enough to hold the overflow. It started simply. Tasha, I love you. That's the truth, no matter what's happened. I told her about the moment I canceled the vendors. About the pain of taking off my shoes and sitting back down. About the silence in the kitchen afterward, where I realized I'd been loving her from a place of desperation for years. I told her that wasn't love anymore. That was survival. And I'm done surviving. In the letter, I wrote, I didn't walk away to hurt you. I walked away to finally protect myself. Then I folded the paper, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it into the back of a drawer. Some words are for closure, not delivery. Last Thursday, I ran into Micah at the grocery store. It wasn't planned. Tasha was at the other end of the aisle, distracted by her phone while he trailed behind with a small cart. He spotted me before she did. His face lit up like Christmas morning. "Grandpa," the sound of his voice sliced through me, sweet and sharp, all at once. I crouched down as he ran into my arms, holding on to me like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't tried to rearrange the way we belonged to each other. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, fighting the sting in my eyes. "Missed you." He pulled back and pointed at his little cart. "Mom let me get apples. I picked the green ones. They're the best." "You always did like the tart ones," I said, smiling. Before I could say more, I heard her voice, tight, alarmed. "Micah, come here." He didn't move right away. He looked between us, confused. I gently let go, stood up slow, and nodded toward her. "Go on. Listen to your mama." She approached, stiff posture, lips pressed tight. "Dad," she said flatly. "Tasha," I replied, just as plain. We stood there in that aisle, a whole history hanging between us. She looked tired. Not makeup tired. Soul tired. Like she hadn't stopped spinning plates long enough to realize half of them had already shattered. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. "Didn't expect to be seen," I replied. Micah was watching us both, wide-eyed, like he was trying to read a conversation that didn't fully include him. "Can we not do this here?" she asked, her voice lowering. I shrugged. "I'm not doing anything. Just shopping." She paused, and for a second, I saw it. The flicker of regret behind her eyes. But she didn't say it. Couldn't. Maybe wouldn't. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "but it was the kind of sorry you throw at a fire hoping it's enough to put out the flames without getting burned." "I hope you are," I said gently, "because that boy deserves better than all this." She nodded, just once, then turned and walked away with Micah trailing beside her, looking back over his shoulder the whole time. That night, I sat in my recliner and played a voicemail from my sister. "Just checking in," she said. "Heard you saw them at the store. I'm proud of you for staying calm." That phrase, "I'm proud of you," again, 3 times in 2 weeks. It shouldn't have felt foreign, but it still did. I keep the unopened gift for Micah on a shelf in the hall closet. Not out of bitterness. Just as a reminder that love doesn't disappear when you draw a boundary. It just becomes something quieter. Something you carry without expectation. I'll give it to him when the time is right. If that time ever comes. And maybe it won't. That's the part no one tells you about healing. It's not always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's about standing so firm in your worth that you stop bleeding for people who only notice you when you're gone. I still love my daughter. That's never changed. But I've learned that love can't be a leash. Not even when it's braided with memories and blood. Especially not then. This chapter of my life doesn't end with a reunion. It ends with me choosing to stay seated. To stop chasing rooms I was never welcome in. To stop fixing things I didn't break. I didn't ruin the party. I just finally stopped building it alone. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been pushed aside by the very people you once carried, share your story in the comments. Let's talk about boundaries, healing, and choosing peace over performative family loyalty. And if you've ever had to walk away from someone you loved, not out of hate, but out of self-respect, this space is for you. Subscribe for more real stories that aren't afraid to sit in the hard truths. See you soon in the next one.